the cloud. Excellent. So we are covering dietary supplements today. I will begin with a acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and recognize their continuing connection to our land. Now, just a quick disclaimer, and this is especially for everyone who's new here today, that all the information and advice we provide you in these seminars, we do make sure it's all accurate, reliable, and in line with the evidence base. So everything we cover today isn't intended to substitute your individual treatment advice or your doctor's advice. If you do have questions that relate to your individual treatments or your treatment plans, I'll always advise you to go straight to your primary healthcare provider or your GP. But I will do my best to help you out with any questions you might have in relation to what we cover today. And I was just saying that please feel free to post as many questions as you want in today's session. We definitely welcome any questions you might have. I'll do my best to answer all of them if I can. In today's session, we are going to visit some of those common dietary supplements you often hear about, particularly in the context of arthritis. But we're going to take a bit of a deeper dive into the research behind them. We're going to look at how they stand up to the hypes and look at if they live up to what they claim to do. We will talk about some safety considerations, and again, we will have a Q&A at the very end. So please feel free to ask as many questions as you wish to. And the thing about dietary supplements, why it's one of my favorite topics, is that it plays a really interesting role in nutrition. So they can have a really powerful effect on our health, sometimes no effect at all. We know that can be really helpful when our bodies need more of certain nutrients than food alone can provide. So this is why they're called dietary supplements. It's meant to supplement the nutrition that's missing from your food. For some people, if they're not needed, they can actually pose a risk of harm in some way. Pretty much like anything we consume or ingest in our bodies, it can have an impact. That's a really important point I want to make. So we know that there is a really big industry built around supplements with a lot of people, a lot of companies making a lot of money from them. So it's really not uncommon to see them sold using persuasive stories, celebrity endorsements, sometimes the so-called miracle cure claims, if you've ever come across those before. And sometimes as consumers, it can actually be really tricky to figure out what's actually right for us, especially when we have such a strong desire to seek out a treatment or a cure for our condition. If you're on social media, or you use it occasionally, I'm sure that you've seen some pretty convincing ads which often look like news articles, maybe health features. These are actually paid promotions and they can be hard to differentiate sometimes. Sometimes they might be sold using testimonial style videos and posts, and not always sold using the evidence base. So that's what we're doing today. We're going to take a closer look at some of those supplements that sound really convincing when it comes to helping our symptoms, arthritis. We'll explore where the evidence actually lies, and then I will actually circle back and talk about some of those superfoods as well. We do get a lot of questions come in about those. So if you do have those, feel free to chuck them in the chat box and ask about them. Sorry, I'm just letting some more people into the room. So we often get asked, is there a supplement that really works for arthritis? Or is there something that can help with my pain? So the simple answer is not exactly. There isn't exactly a single supplement or a magic pill that's available to cure or treat arthritis at this stage. It doesn't mean that supplements have no place at all. Some can actually make a really big difference if they're used appropriately. And I'm going to give you an example here. So if you have osteoporosis, and there is that higher need for something like calcium and vitamin D, then there's pretty good evidence a supplement like that could be beneficial for you. And when we're talking about evidence-based, though, I want to make it clear that not all therapies fit into the same evidence box. And I've spoken about this in previous webinars, and I'm going to revisit it for those who are new here. Just quickly, traditional evidence, it comes from a long-standing cultural or historical use. For example, turmeric in Ayurvedic medicine. In Australia here, a product can be registered as having evidence of traditional use if it's being consistently used for the same purpose, um, consistently for at least 75 years or three generations. So a lot of traditional remedies, when you're applying scientific methods to them to look at the evidence behind them, you'll find a lot of them don't actually outperform a placebo in clinical trials. It's not to say they're not beneficial or they don't offer any real benefits. Their value often lies in lived experience and cultural continuity, and they shouldn't be dismissed outright if they're safe and meaningful to the person using them. Safety is a big thing that I'll keep going back to as well. Um, but when we're talking about scientific evidence and the evidence base, this usually is referring to the data that's generated through those rigorous study designs. So researchers want to know what really causes what. So researchers will use carefully designed studies like those randomized controlled trials that I'll be mentioning time and time again. They're your gold standard studies. You have control group studies, but pretty much the researchers here want to check that the cause happens before the effect. So they look for patterns that repeat across different people and settings, and they make sure that the advice that is given is based on what actually works. And this can take years to collate this data. The recommendations built on evidence isn't just about what seems to be linked. So it's really important to consider treatment effects, but also consider the quality of study and the quality of evidence that's behind that. So people who take glucosamine, for example, often report less joint pain, but that doesn't exactly prove the supplement is the cause. Those people could be exercising more. They could also be eating a healthier diet. Maybe they're managing their weight. Um, so there are a lot of other reasons as to why someone could actually be feeling better if they're taking glucosamine. Um, and so the important thing is that it's actually making the person feel better. So bottom line here is that even if a supplement doesn't outperform a placebo in clinical trials that are built on very strong scientific principles, if it offers a benefit to someone, there's another discussion to be had around that. So what's important is that just because the scientific evidence doesn't hold up for many supplements, it's really important that as consumers, we're navigating all the options safely. We're taking them with informed consent. We're exploring them effectively. We're also weighing up something like cost versus benefits. So all these things are really important to consider if you're looking at taking a dietary supplement. So let's take a closer look at some of those supplements that are often promoted in the realm of arthritis. And we'll start with glucosamine and chondroitin. So more than half of people with osteoarthritis, they do take some kind of supplement. I think it's greater than 60% of people with OA. And often it's because they hope it will protect their joints from getting worse. It might help fix the problem. Others take them because they feel it really does make a difference to their symptoms. There's a lot of different reasons why people with arthritis turn to supplements. If you have any reasons behind why you've chosen to go down the dietary supplement pathway, I'd love to hear from it. So feel free to post that in the chat. But the two most common ones we hear about, glucosamine and chondroitin, and often they're found together in the same product. If we look at why these two active ingredients are so popular in this landscape, glucosamine, for one, is part of the structure of cartilage. So supposedly it's meant to help with that growth and repair of the cartilage tissue. Chondroitin is another component of cartilage that plays a role in absorbing water in the joint. So it's supposedly got a role in helping that in resistance to compression. So because glucosamine and chondroitin are components of cartilage, it's been suggested that they might have an impact on joint structure in osteoarthritis. And whilst its mechanistic effects are plausible, we're going to take a look here at the research behind it. And I'm going to start with the GATE trial. So the glucosamine chondroitin arthritis intervention trial, one of the largest, most well-known studies that have examined effects of glucosamine and chondroitin in osteoarthritis. So this was a landmark clinical trial sponsored by the NIH, which is the National Institutes of Health, and they looked at whether glucosamine and chondroitin supplements were actually effective in treating osteoarthritis pain. So over 24 weeks, just really quickly, participants with knee osteoarthritis were given glucosamine sulfate at 1,500 milligrams per day, chondroitin sulfate at 1,200 milligrams per day. A group of people were given a combination of both, or they were given a placebo. So while the study found supplements were generally safe, they were well tolerated, overall pain reduction in the general study wasn't significantly greater than a placebo. There was some pain relief for a subset of patients, and it was more for those patients who had very severe osteoarthritis pain in the knee. It wasn't observed across the whole population study. And this is very much consistent with the many, many studies that have followed on from this investigation. So I'm just going to let some people in. For most studies, positive effects have largely been confined to smaller, lower quality, or even industry-funded trials. So suggesting there is some possible bias behind the studies that suggest there's a positive effect to notice here. The larger, more rigorous trials with better study designs have shown no meaningful benefit. So the possible slight effect for knee osteoarthritis, which has been observed, hasn't exactly been backed by the best of evidence. So pretty much those benefits of taking glucosamine for osteoarthritis pain, they do seem to disappear when those high quality, well conducted, independently funded studies are considered. So the strongest effects we're hearing about are usually reported in those biased or smaller studies. So we can't really say there's a true effect for taking these yet. In some further research, in a meta-analysis review of 30 randomized controlled trials, which involved over a total of 7,100 people, results suggested that taking glucosamine or chondroitin might help a little bit with pain and stiffness, but the effect was very small. You could think of it as just a tiny nudge rather than a big change. So some people noticed it, some people didn't notice it. That benefit wasn't exactly the same for everyone. Some people noticed a real improvement, and they were the people who had way more severe symptoms. Other people reported they didn't notice anything really at all. So overall, we can't say a significant benefit was seen for these supplements compared to placebo. And that's pretty much where the evidence lies here. The good news is that these supplements were very safe. So there were very few side effects reported. If you're wanting to try this as a consumer and you've considered it, it's not likely to hurt, but the use of glucosamine and chondroitin supplements remains really controversial, and it's just because those results from all the studies, those really well-designed studies, are just so mixed. Some studies suggest they provide modest relief of pain. Other studies show little to no benefit. Just something to be aware of. Everything you take might come with side effects, and the side effects that have been reported for glucosamine are minor, but it includes having an upset stomach, nausea, heartburn, diarrhea, constipation. There might be interactions with certain medications. So glucosamine has been reported to interact with blood thinners like warfarin. So it's really important to always check with your healthcare provider if it's safe for you to take, especially if you're on some medications. Another consideration is that if you have allergies or sensitivities, particularly to shellfish, these glucosamine supplements are actually derived from the shells of crabs and lobsters and shrimps and shellfish. So if you do have an allergy, you should use a lot of caution when you're selecting certain products. And you can always ask a pharmacist as well and double check. Now, bear with me while I attempt to say this supplement. So methylsulfonylmethane. We use MSM for short, and that's what you often see advertised in the pharmacies. And when you go to the shops, you'll see MSM. This is a naturally occurring organosulfur compound. It's a naturally occurring compound found in plants, animals, and humans, but it's often taken as a supplement to help with support joint health and reduce inflammation. So supposedly it does help produce those molecules in cartilage that trap the water, which is said to keep that tissue all springy and shock absorbing, which is one of the functions that we lose when we do have severe osteoarthritis. So sulfur compounds are really important in the body. They're used in a lot of different ways, but they're used in ways like helping with the process of building collagen which keeps cartilage all strong and supported. And I'll talk about collagen shortly. And then also supporting connective tissues like ligaments and tendons, which are essential for holding joints together essentially. So the theory behind MSM is that it might help the structures around your joints stay strong, cushioned, resilient. But we do say this when it's combined with other healthy lifestyle approaches like exercise and good nutrition. So you can see, whilst there's a plausible mechanism of action here as to why it could possibly be helpful for arthritis, if we take a look at the evidence, it's quite mixed. So some studies show no real benefit at all. One in particular, and this was a randomized controlled trial by Kim and colleagues back in 2006, they found a significant improvement in pain and physical function, which is really interesting. They found it in a group of people who had knee osteoarthritis, and they took 6 grams per day. When we look at the broader research behind this supplement, most of the positive results, they come from small studies that vary a lot in design and quality. So there hasn't really been a consistent, well-designed study to suggest this is what works and how it works. While MSM probably helps reduce pain and improve function compared to placebo, the evidence is very weak. It's one of those supplements where people report feeling better on it, but we don't have the data to back it just yet. So several meta-analyses indicate that the supplement medication, it probably reduces pain compared to placebo, but the magnitude of the benefit is going back and very dependent on the model that's used. So you can see there were 3 trials here. The Eberhardt trial, a small benefit for the active treatment was seen, but the results weren't statistically significant. The Bookman trial, there was no difference between an active treatment and a placebo, and this is said with very high uncertainty. And then in your Kim trial, there was a larger pain reduction that was noticed with the active treatment, and there was a statistically significant benefit. And so what you can see here is that the study's results really vary. When all the data is pulled, there's evidence for a slight benefit, but the uncertainty is just so high. There's not enough studies to even start with guiding the use of MSM for arthritis treatment. You could easily say this evidence is still emerging, but it is considered generally safe and the side effects are rare. So possible side effects are going to include your mild bloating, your headaches, fatigue, maybe urinary retention, constipation, and there's been no contraindications that have been identified just yet. But something to be aware of is this supplement can affect your blood sugar levels, which is going to be particularly important if you have something like type 2 diabetes or even type 1 diabetes. Just like any natural product or nutraceutical, you must talk to your doctor before taking them. Most MSM supplements are free from those common allergens, but a lot of them do contain filler ingredients, which occasionally some people might react to. Again, that is very highly individual and depends on what sensitivities or allergies you have. Another supplement, I'm not sure if many people have heard of this one. It's called Gel, and it's a different type of supplement altogether. So this one is different because it's a plant extract where it's derived from the bark of a French maritime pine tree. It's not a structural component of cartilage or connective tissue. So when we're talking about glucosamine or collagen, even MSM, there's some function in the body where it's naturally occurring. Not this one. Instead, it acts mainly as a bioactive antioxidant and an anti-inflammatory compound. So it's said to be rich in all these beneficial properties that have several biological effects in the body that are relevant to joint health. So its main proposed mode of action is that it stimulates the production of collagen and hyaluronic acid, which are actually important building blocks for things like cartilage, joint cushioning, even skin elasticity. So it's supposedly indirectly helps with osteoarthritis symptoms like reducing pain and stiffness and swelling. So there's been a few randomized controlled trials done on this supplement, but many of them are well designed, which is great to see. The catch is most of them are quite small or they're very short in duration, or there's some kind of potential sponsorship bias there. So you always have to keep those in the back of your mind when you're reading this research. When we're talking about that quality of evidence, we would consider it to be quite low. So when the researchers pull all these studies together in what we call a systematic review and a meta-analysis, they find that Gel probably does reduce pain and improve function compared to placebo, particularly in people with knee osteoarthritis. But the strength of this effect and how confident we can be in saying that, it's actually really depending on how that data is analyzed. When researchers use something called a fixed effects model, the results consistently show a statistically significant reduction in pain. When the random effects model is used, which is a bit more conservative, it accounts for differences between studies, the benefit is still actually there. It's smaller, sometimes not statistically significant at all. And that's why, pretty much in simple terms, we're saying this supplement might help with pain and function, but we say that with very low confidence. We don't have a lot of confidence in that result. And the evidence behind it is just so mixed. The quality of the studies behind it is very low. So they're things to consider. It's really important that we highlight that there's not enough studies yet to give us firm guidance on how to use this supplement as well, especially when it comes to treatment for arthritis. The evidence is still emerging, just like any supplement, but this supplement can have side effects. The most common ones reported are things like upset stomach, dizziness, vertigo. Most important thing is that it can interact with certain medications, particularly medicines that suppress the immune system. So this could be chemotherapy drugs, it could be blood thinners, or drugs to manage rheumatoid arthritis. So this supplement has the potential to stimulate the immune system. So it's might not be safe for people with immune conditions like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, even multiple sclerosis. So it's really important to talk to your doctor about this before just opting to try this supplement because it claims to be beneficial. The last supplement I do want to talk about is collagen, and it's because it has such a huge rap at the moment, especially in the context of arthritis management. Collagen is actually the main structural component of our connective tissues and cartilage. So collagen is actually the most abundant protein in our body. It makes up 30% of our total body protein. So you could think of it almost like the scaffolding that gives all our tissues strength and structure. So just some quick science behind collagen. It's made up of 3 amino acid chains that are twisted together. It's made of hydroxyproline is one of those amino acids unique to collagen. Your body makes it from the other amino acid proline, but it can only do this if you have enough vitamin C in your body. So pretty much if you've ever heard of scurvy, which is a severe vitamin C deficiency, collagen can actually become extremely weak and tissues can begin to fall apart. Now, collagen is not a single molecule. There are actually 28 different types of it, but the most abundant types we see on the market are type 1, 2, and 3. Type 1 is actually found in our skin, bone, tendons, and there's a few other tissues as well. Type 2 is mainly found in joint cartilage, and I'll be taking a closer look at that one. Type 3 is found in ligaments, skin, blood vessels, even some internal organs. So when people take collagen supplements for joint health, it's usually type 2 collagen we're talking about. You might see it on the market in two forms, as undenatured or hydrolyzed. Just quickly, hydrolyzed collagen is said to nourish and rebuild cartilage tissue. Undenatured collagen is supposedly able to calm the immune response and may offer that protection to cartilage in that way. So it's said to work via the immune system. Some people combine both, although the research on using them in a combined fashion is very limited. Hydrolyzed collagen is what you will see on the market more than others. And the idea is that collagen peptides could help stimulate that collagen cartilage matrix, which helps reduce joint inflammation. So it's said to offer the amino acid building blocks that the cells need to build more cartilage. Overall evidence suggests that your type 2 hydrolyzed collagen peptides might have a role as a complementary approach when managing osteoarthritis. And there's been a lot of studies behind this. When we look at the bigger picture, there's actually been over 315 randomized controlled trials that have included over 3,000 participants, most showing small to moderate improvements in pain relief and function. But more recently, back in 2023, there was a review that was published and it summarized the research on hydrolyzed collagen for joint health. In 6 of the randomized controlled trials and 3 observational studies, although there was a lot of variability between study designs, treatment groups, there were different dosages used, there were different types of collagen given, different study lengths, different, pretty much a lot of differences in the studies. Every study still showed some kind of improvement in symptoms like pain, stiffness, and swelling. The biggest improvements that were noted across these studies were pain, physical function, and quality of life. And they all use different tools which were validated. Most of these studies were randomized, double-blinded placebo trials, so a really good, well-designed. But participants didn't know if they were taking the collagen or the placebo. So they were well-designed, well-thought-out studies that actually showed good promise. One really interesting finding was that one of the studies that looked at proteoglycan content in knee cartilage, this in simple is just a marker of cartilage production. They actually found when it was exposed to collagen, it increased. So it suggests that collagen supplements might be able to help restore some of that cartilage that has been lost in osteoarthritis. And supporting this were cell culture studies that showed cartilage producing cells actually ramp up collagen production when exposed to hydrolyzed collagen. So the findings you could say are promising, but you absolutely need more high quality long-term studies. Hydrolyzed collagen appears to be safe, appears to be potentially beneficial, but we can't say that with any, strong recommendations behind it. In the context of rheumatoid arthritis, I find this particularly interesting. Undenatured collagen, you might also see it occasionally advertised as native collagen, is a form of collagen that has been minimally processed. So it hasn't been exposed to all the heat and the chemical processing like hydrolyzed collagen. The idea is that it keeps its protein structure intact. Unlike hydrolyzed collagen, undenatured collagen is said to work through that immune system, which is why its effects on rheumatoid arthritis raises really interesting questions. There have been some small in vitro and animal studies that suggest collagen might have some anti inflammatory and immune modulating effects, possibly through a mechanism called oral tolerance, where the immune system learns to not overreact to the joint cartilage. So it helps in a way suppress that inflammatory attack. There's absolutely no human clinical evidence on this, and the results of the study that have been done so far are mixed. It's a really interesting agent to consider for further research, but that's pretty much where it's been left at. The studies that have been done on this topic so far, they're actually a lot older. So it's not by any means new research in this landscape. The papers that have been published so far are just merely hypothesis generating, more like discovery rather than definitive evidence that collagen causes or treats human rheumatoid arthritis. There's a lot of weaknesses when you go through and you appraise the studies. Main weaknesses are going to be an overinterpretation of animal and mechanistic data. There's a conflation of different conditions and collagen formulations. And, if we were to focus on this hypothesis, it does place a selective emphasis that can lead to misleading clinical claims, which we don't want. So just keep that in mind if you were to ever see this as a claim. Collagen is generally considered very safe. And this is mainly because it's a food derived protein. It's not a drug or a therapeutic agent in any way. Across dozens of clinical trials, there have been very few adverse effects reported. Most people do seem to tolerate it well, although there might be the side effects like digestive upsets, like being bloated or full. The serious side effects are very rare. You could say that as somewhat of a red flag is that in doses of around 10 grams per day or more has actually been shown to increase oxalate levels in urine. So this really does increase susceptible individuals. If you're someone who gets kidney stones, you would want to use a lot of caution if you're going to be taking high doses of this type of supplement. Um, so just like anything, you want to run this past your healthcare provider and keep that in mind. If you have a fish or a shellfish allergy, it's best to avoid those marine collagen products. They're often made from fish skins, scales, and whilst they're usually well processed, the proteins can still trigger reactions. Instead, you might want to look for bovine or pork sources if you can tolerate them safely, if they're part of your diet. Despite the name of plant-based collagen, just be aware plants don't make collagen. Collagen is actually an animal product. So when you go to the shops and you see products marketed as plant collagen or collagen boosters, they don't actually contain collagen itself. Instead, they might contain the vitamins, minerals, or the amino acids that support the body's own collagen production, but they don't contain collagen itself. So they're not going to exert the same kind of benefits you're reading about in these studies. They can still be useful, but they're not going to be the same as taking collagen peptides, which contain very unique amino acid sequences. There are so many different types of collagen supplements on the market: undenatured, hydrolyzed, marine, bovine, multi-collagen blends. When it comes to joint health, the evidence so far supports the hydrolyzed collagen to a degree. And it's because this type of collagen is easily absorbed, it's well studied, it shows some consistent benefits for pain, joint function. There's even some evidence for how it works with skin elasticity. So always want to keep that in mind if you're in the market for collagen products. And then I do want to say on a final note, superfoods, because I'm also sure you've seen these headlines somewhere across the internet or on your phone somewhere. When we look at superfoods, and so we're talking about bone broth, berries, turmeric, or any other foods promoted for joint health, I've got them listed here so you can see fatty fish, turmeric, ginger, cherries, apple cider vinegar, gelatin, all of these foods that have been promoted for joints. The evidence is generally much weaker and less specific. Most of your superfoods contain beneficial nutrients and antioxidants. So, in some way, they're going to support overall health. In some way, I can look at these and say some of them have a role in inflammation control, but there haven't been the clinical trials done to support the fact that they rebuild cartilage specifically or they're going to improve joint pain specifically. Not in the same way that the supplement research has been done. So, including nutrient dense foods and anti inflammatory ingredients is always going to be a good idea, especially for general well being. Superfoods can't replace things though, like medications, the therapeutic agents, herbs, and dietary supplements, if you're looking at those targeted effects on joint structure and function. The term superfood itself is something to flag. It's largely a marketing driven term. It's not a scientific classification. So companies will use and highlight a single nutrient or an antioxidant or a bioactive compound, and they might claim it has miraculous health benefits. The reality is these foods are good foods to include, but they're not going to be a miracle solution like they're sometimes made out to be. Eating a variety of colorful whole foods is always going to be far more effective for joint health, but as it stands, there's no singular food that we can say has enough evidence to claim it can cure arthritis. These it's the evidence is always going to be behind dietary patterns. So, dietary patterns are recently backed by clinical trials and systematic reviews. When I talk about dietary patterns, I'm more referring to diets like the Mediterranean diet or the anti inflammatory diet. The effect sizes are often modest, but there is sufficient evidence to back the recommendations behind them. So, Mediterranean diet, omega 3 fatty acids, whole foods, fruits, vegetables, spices, these do offer benefits in some way for osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis. Weight loss. We know reducing excess body weight reliably improves osteoarthritis outcomes. So it can make a meaningful difference if it's relevant to you. So that's just something to be aware of if you're ever looking at um, consuming a singular food in excess because you've read it's going to be beneficial for your pain and your arthritic symptoms. Just know this is currently where the evidence is at. And if you ever want to revisit things like the anti-inflammatory diet, what that is, how do I follow, why is it beneficial, take a deeper dive into the Mediterranean diet. We've covered this recently in previous webinars, so you can always go back and watch the recordings that we've delivered, or you can keep an eye on next year's webinars because we will continue to revisit those. There's a lot of evidence behind them, but it's continuing to evolve, it's continuing to grow. And so it's always about staying up to date with the latest evidence. So, as it stands, the evidence is mixed. There isn't enough scientific proof to claim that any supplement or superfood can cure arthritis. I always say be a smart consumer, always check those labels really carefully. Always look out for exaggerated and misleading marketing claims. And safety is the biggest thing. So, natural doesn't always mean risk free. Some remedies can interact with medications, some of us have allergies. Always discuss new supplements with your healthcare provider first. So, I hope that's given us some further insight. I know there's only a select few of supplements I can talk about within the space of an hour, and there's so many more on the market. But I definitely want to hear from you guys and see if you have any questions. I will just pause the recording for now.